if your mind doesn't stop even when everything is silent. This video is for you. Have you ever lay in bed exhausted, with your body asking for rest? But doesn't the mind just turn off? It's as if there's a broken switch inside you, where thoughts about the past and the future alternate without pause. And the most curious thing is that this is not just lack of relaxation, but a deep pattern linked to what we call overthinking and rumination. The problem is that as you try to work it all out by thinking more, the mind goes into a silent cycle of anxiety. The amygdala fires warning signals as if something is always about to go wrong, while the prefrontal cortex tries to organize this mental chaos without success. And in the midst of it all, the brain's default network remains active, as if it were reliving scenes and simulating possibilities non-stop. Maybe you think thinking too much protects you, that anticipating everything gives you control. But what if this attempt at control is precisely what's fueling your hypervigilance and keeping you stuck in this constant state of alert? This is where the mind begins to confuse security with exhaustion, and clarity with overthinking. The most disturbing thing is that many people have been living like this for years without realizing it. A childhood marked by insecurity, a life guided by attachment theory, and a brain trained to never completely relax. But there is a point where this pattern begins to overflow, and that's exactly where the story changes direction. Have you ever noticed how overthinking starts almost innocently, as an attempt to better understand something? But, in a few minutes, it becomes an infinite loop of rumination, where the same thought repeats itself. And when you notice, you're already stuck in a sense of anxiety that seems to have no way out. It is as if the mind created a room without doors, only mirrors reflecting the same fear. The most curious thing is that this cycle does not happen by chance, it follows an automatic pattern. The brain's default network kicks in and begins to revisit memories, scenarios, and possibilities. The amygdala interprets everything as a threat, even when there is no real danger going on. And the prefrontal cortex tries to organize this chaos, but ends up overloaded. Deep down, what you feel is not just thinking too much, it is a form of mental imprisonment. Hypervigilance keeps you on your toes, as if something important is always about to happen. And so overthinking feeds on rumination itself, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. But the most interesting thing is to understand how this gear starts to look normal. And that changes everything in the next point. Overthinking is often born out of the idea that thinking more means having more control. You start by trying to predict everything, as if the mind can avoid any mistakes or pain. But little by little, rumination takes over and turns planning into anxious repetition. And what seemed like control turns into just a constant feeling of quiet anxiety. The truth is that the brain loves the illusion of predictability, even when it doesn't exist. The amygdala reinforces this search for security by activating alerts for imaginary scenarios. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex tries to create logic in situations that haven't even happened yet. And the brain's default network keeps you trapped in endless mental simulations. That's when overthinking starts to feel like a survival strategy. Hypervigilance makes you believe that if you think hard enough, nothing bad will happen. But this constant effort further fuels overthinking and rumination. And, without realizing it, the control becomes a mental prison disguised as protection. And that goes deeper into the next point. Rumination isn't just overthinking, it's like getting stuck in the same stretch of a mental movie. You relive conversations, mistakes, and scenarios as if you could rewrite the past with new thoughts. Overthinking enters this process as fuel, feeding each turn of this internal cycle. And the result is an anxiety that grows precisely from the attempt to solve what has already happened. This pattern is strengthened because the brain learns by repetition, not by intention. The brain's default network begins to associate mental silence with danger or discomfort. The amygdala goes into a state of alert whenever you try to stop thinking. And the prefrontal cortex ends up stuck trying to organize thoughts that don't want to end. Over time, rumination is no longer an occasional thing and becomes an automatic mode of operation. Hypervigilance keeps you emotionally attached to every detail of the past or future. And overthinking starts to seem part of your identity, as if it were impossible to turn off. But this mental repetition often has deeper roots. And that brings us to the next point. Overthinking often does not start in adulthood, it is cultivated way back in childhood. When a child grows up in unstable environments, they learn that they need to think too much to protect themselves. Rumination arises as an attempt to understand the unpredictable and avoid emotional pain. And anxiety is being constructed as a normal state of internal functioning. In this context, attachment theory helps to understand how insecure attachments shape the mind. If care has been inconsistent, the brain learns to be in constant hypervigilance. The amygdala starts to react with intensity even to subtle signs of rejection or abandonment. And the prefrontal cortex grows trying to predict other people's behaviors all the time. Over time, the child's mind transforms protection into an automatic mental habit. The brain's default network begins to simulate scenarios to avoid emotional surprises. Overthinking becomes a silent strategy for emotional survival learned early. But the deepest thing is to realize how this continues to be active in adult life. And that connects to the next point. Hypervigilance is born as an intelligent way of adapting to unpredictable environments. When everything around seems unstable, the brain learns to watch before relaxing. Overthinking emerges as an extension of this constant vigilance, trying to anticipate risks. And anxiety starts to work like an alarm that never finds an off button. The amygdala, in this state, becomes hyper-responsive, as if any detail could be a threat. It sends continuous warning signals, even in neutral or safe situations. The prefrontal cortex tries to rationalize, but gets caught up in overanalyzing possibilities. And the brain's default network keeps the mind running prevention scenarios all the time. Over time, this adaptation ceases to be useful and becomes exhausting. The mind no longer knows how to differentiate real security from imagined control. Rumination comes in as an attempt to organize this excess of internal surveillance. And overthinking becomes the default mode of operation. Attachment theory shows how our early attachments shape how we feel safe in the world. When care is inconsistent, the brain learns that love can come and go without warning. This strengthens overthinking, which tries to predict any sign of emotional withdrawal. And anxiety becomes an automatic response to any relational uncertainty. Childhood here is not just a phase, but the terrain where emotional patterns are programmed. Hypervigilance is born as an attempt to avoid rejection even before it happens. The amygdala reacts intensely to small changes in tone, silence, or distance. And the prefrontal cortex starts to interpret every social detail as something strategic. With this, the mind creates an internal system of protection based on constant anticipation. Rumination appears as a way to review conversations and behaviors repeatedly. Overthinking tries to ensure emotional safety in a world that seems unstable. But this internal structure also has an even deeper biological basis. And that opens up the next point. Overthinking is not just a mental habit, it is a dynamic between different areas of the brain. The amygdala works as an emotional alarm system, always looking for possible threats. When it becomes hyperactive, anxiety rises and the mind goes into a state of constant alert. And this makes room for rumination, which tries to explain what the body has already felt. The prefrontal cortex comes in as the rational part, trying to organize and make sense of thoughts. But when there is too much stimulus, he becomes overloaded and loses efficiency in decision-making. It is in this conflict that overthinking intensifies, between intense emotion and tired logic. And the mind starts to oscillate between control and confusion all the time. The brain's default network is responsible for automatic thoughts and internal daydreams. It activates memories, simulations, and scenarios even when you're not focused on anything. In people with hypervigilance, this network fuels continuous cycles of rumination. And so, the entire brain participates in the cycle that keeps overthinking alive. Overthinking begins to distort reality when the mind starts to trust imagined scenarios more than the present. Rumination turns small uncertainties into full-blown stories of threat and failure. Anxiety grows not because of what is happening, but because of what can happen in the mind. And hypervigilance makes everything seem more urgent, more serious, and more out of control than it really is. In this process, the amygdala reacts as if every thought were a real and immediate event. The body responds with tension, even without concrete danger, reinforcing the emotional cycle. The prefrontal cortex tries to correct these distortions, but it is often already exhausted. And the brain's default network keeps feeding negative simulations in the background. Over time, overthinking begins to erase the difference between possibility and reality. The mind interprets thoughts as reliable predictions, not hypotheses. Rumination reinforces this confusion, making everything more emotional than factual. And this sets the stage for something even more limiting. Analysis paralysis happens when overthinking gets so intense that any decision seems too risky. You think, rethink, simulate scenarios, and in the end you don't get out of place. Rumination creates so many negative possibilities that taking action seems dangerous. And anxiety grows precisely because of the lack of movement. In this state, the brain enters a strange cycle of over-planning and zero execution. The prefrontal cortex tries to calculate all possible variables before any step. But the amygdala keeps triggering alerts, as if every choice is a threat. And hypervigilance makes even simple decisions seem too complex. Over time, life begins to be lived more in the mind than in reality. The default brain network replaces action with constant simulations of what if. Overthinking creates an illusion of preparation, but in practice it generates stagnation, and that's when this pattern starts to connect with the surrounding environment. And that leads to the next point. Overthinking doesn't just live inside the mind, it's also reinforced by the social environment you're in. We live in a culture that often confuses overanalysis with intelligence and depth. Rumination comes to be seen as critical thinking, even when it only generates anxiety. And hypervigilance masquerades as responsibility, productivity, and emotional maturity. On social media, at work, and even in everyday conversations, overthinking has become almost a silent standard of acceptance. The prefrontal cortex is constantly required to make quick and complex decisions all the time. Meanwhile, the amygdala reacts to excessive comparison, demanding, and constant stimulation, and the brain's default network never finds real rest, only more information. With this, overthinking is no longer just an individual behavior and becomes a response to the environment. Rumination intensifies because there's always something new to process, evaluate, or anticipate. Anxiety becomes almost collective, like the background noise of modern life. And this scenario inevitably begins to take a toll on the body and emotions. And that shows up in the next point. Overthinking doesn't just stay in the head, it starts to leak into the entire body. Constant rumination keeps the nervous system on alert, as if something is always about to happen. Anxiety manifests itself physically, racing the heart, tensing muscles, and messing up sleep. And hypervigilance makes rest difficult, almost suspicious for the brain itself. Over time, the amygdala keeps the body in survival mode even without real danger. This directly contributes to insomnia. As the mind does not find the off button, the prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded, and even simple tasks begin to require excessive mental effort, and the brain's default network remains active. Night, fueling automatic and repetitive thoughts. In addition to physical fatigue, there is a feeling of disconnection with life itself. Overthinking makes you live more inside your head than in the present moment. Rumination robs you of spontaneity, and everything starts to feel heavy or distant, and this makes room for something different as a possibility of exit. The first step to weakening overthinking is not to fight against thoughts, but to change how you relate to them. The practice of mindfulness helps to bring attention back to the present, reducing the strength of rumination. Instead of being pulled by anxiety, you learn to observe thoughts as mental events, not as absolute truths, and this is already beginning to alleviate hypervigilance, which loses strength when the present gains space. Cognitive diffusion comes in as a powerful tool in this process. It teaches that thoughts are not orders or predictions, just constructions of the mind in motion. The prefrontal cortex stops working in excessive control mode and starts operating more flexibly. Meanwhile, the amygdala is gradually being deactivated from the constant threat response. With the practice of acceptance, the goal is not to stop thinking, but to stop being controlled by thought. The default network of the brain remains active, but it no longer dominates the emotional state. Overthinking and rumination lose intensity when they are no longer fueled by internal struggle. And this is where a new type of relationship with the mind begins to emerge. Lighter, more conscious, freer. Once you understand all this path, maybe you start to notice something uncomfortable. Overthinking is not just an isolated mental habit, but an entire system that involves rumination, anxiety, and hypervigilance working together. And when you look closer, you can see how the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the default network of the brain enter into this silent game that happens every day inside you. But the most important question is not why does this happen, but rather how much of your life is being lived inside your head. Now think with me. How many decisions have you failed to make because of paralysis by analysis? How many times has rumination trapped you in the past, while the present has simply passed? And how many opportunities have you missed because anxiety seemed more real than reality itself? Are you living or just trying to predict life before it happens? The good news is that none of this has to be a fixed destination. When you start practicing mindfulness, applying cognitive diffusion, and observing your thoughts more lightly, something profoundly changes in the way you exist in the world. Overthinking doesn't go away overnight, but it loses control over you. And little by little, the inner silence ceases to be a threat and becomes space again. So I leave you with a simple reflection. You want to continue being someone who thinks about life, or someone who lives life? What would happen if, today, you took the first step out of this automatic cycle of rumination and hypervigilance? What if, instead of trying to control everything, you started just being present? Perhaps the answer is not to think more, but to think less and live more. If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos, because here we continue to explore the human mind in a simple, deep, and transformative way.